Greetings. This is Kai Hagen, here again with another in a series of video podcasts with leaders and business people and others in our community about how their business, their life, their area of concern is affected by the current public health crisis and the economic crisis that goes along with it. We've had a lot of interesting discussions, and today is guaranteed to be one of those. I'm very pleased today to have with me John Fieseler. I've known John for, I guess, about 14 years now. He's been the executive director of the Tourism Council in Frederick County since December of 1997. Almost 23 years, 22 and a half years. Wow. While working at Frederick radio stations prior to that, he served on the Tourism Council's board for 6 years, including 2 as president. As the executive director, John represents Frederick County in the Maryland Association of Destination Marketing Organizations, is a past chair of the organization, and currently chairs the research committee. He's the chairman of the board of directors for the 6-state Civil War Trails organization, a member of the board of the Downtown Frederick Partnership, advisory committee member and past board chair of the Frederick-Washington-Carroll County's Heart of the Civil War Heritage Area, and on the board of the local Goodwill. He has previously served on both the Maryland Tourism Development Board and the Maryland Heritage Areas Authority, each as a gubernatorial appointment. He's a 1979 graduate, which makes him 1 year older than me, of Fordham University in the Bronx, and with a BA in communications. He and his wife, Katie, live in a 1790s log and stone farmhouse that they restored near Kemar, Maryland. And if you don't know John, you're probably in the minority nowadays, because he's been a very active and visible part of our community for a long time and has one of the most recognizable voices around. So, but anyway, welcome, John.
Thanks, pleasure.
So life has changed. One of the things about this whole experience is that it literally is something that affects every single part of your life, every single part and person in our community. The tourism industry is a big part of Frederick County. And if you could, we're going to talk a little bit about how that's been affected and how it might be able to come out of it successfully. There's things we know and obviously things we don't know, but maybe you could lead in just a little bit about sort of the broader overall perspective on its role in our community.
Sure, and I'll make this brief, but the organization, we brand ourselves as Visit Frederick these days, but it's the Tourism Council of Frederick County, Inc., spun off of the Chamber of Commerce back in 1976 during the National Bicentennial, and Frederick County communities, like the rest of the country, were taking pride in their role in the history and sprucing up. And there was a committee at the Chamber that decided there ought to be a separate organization just focused on growing tourism. So, we've been around since that point. Early example of a public-private partnership, and the goal is really to encourage folks to come from other areas to spend their money here and then to go home. And that way you and your fellow council members don't have to build schools for their kids or run a road to their house because they live somewhere else, but they leave those their dollars, including many tax dollars in our community, $428.3 million in the most recent years. So about $1.1 million a day. And that really benefits every single taxpayer in the county, not just the obvious businesses that benefit from that direct spending.
And the number of businesses is significant. The number of employees who are either fully or partly depending on tourism, but they're also all over the county. And this is not, people think of Frederick City as a destination, but really the Tourism Council and the county itself, has done a great deal to just, tourism dollars are spent in almost every community in every part of our county, really. And people are attracted to destinations all over the place. And but how many businesses are there that are directly or indirectly connected to tourism?
We have about 400 members. So it's the obvious folks, the hotels, a couple of dozen hotels, but hundreds of restaurants, the retailers, different attractions. So about 400, altogether that, depending on the type of their business, visitor spending is either a large part of their business or it's the profit margin. It's a smaller part if they serve mostly residents and say workers during the week. So some percentage of those three, I think that makes Frederick County fortunate in that we don't have all of our eggs in one basket. So there are markets that are known as convention cities. Those folks are going to be hurting for a long time, I think. There are other locations where it's all weekday business travel that fills up the hotels and they're empty on weekends, or it's the reverse, where it's busy with leisure on weekends but dead during the week. Knock on wood, we have always had a nice mix of that. And after previous incidents, 9/11, the recession later that decade, we've seen the different segments kind of come back at different rates, but diversified enough that, we've been fortunate. Now, this is actually the worst hit that our hotel industry has ever taken. I went back and looked up the reports from after 9/11 and 2008, 2009 timeframe, and never saw anything get down to 30% occupancy in hotels. I mean, that really is unprecedented impact.
I doubt it was even close because, life went on for many people in most ways, businesses and the economy. Obviously, we took a hit and there was a big change in a lot of ways. But this is, again, something that is affecting literally everybody everywhere. But you make a good point that it's not just the businesses that are directly and primarily associated with tourism, the destination locations, the Airbnbs, perhaps, and bed and breakfasts and, canoe rentals and things like that. But the restaurants and other activities that just get that extra significant share that's become sort of baked into the economy that they're a part of and their business model, is based around. How are people dealing with it right now? I mean, are many of them eligible for kinds of support? Have they been able to get it? Do you have a good feeling that most of these are going to be able to make it through here, or is you seeing something different?
Well, we hear some scary projections about, nationwide, the number of small businesses that may not come out the other end. We, along with our partners, one of the things I have to say about Frederick County that really is a blessing, and I didn't realize it until I started traveling more around the state and to neighboring states, how very fortunate we are to have organizations like the county's Office of Economic Development, the city's Department of Economic Development, the Downtown Frederick Partnership, the other main streets from Thurmont down to Brunswick, as well as Chamber of Commerce. And we all meet regularly. We know each other. I always say that this county, the community, is large enough that there is a lot going on, but small enough that we all know each other. Mm-hmm. And that may sound like an obvious thing, but you don't have to travel that far to find places where the directors of these different organizations, I think, live in silos. They don't know their counterparts, and everybody's busy enough that, knock on wood, we don't have turf issues. And so there's a lot of collaboration. On top of that, we just have an awesome community. I mean, we saw that right away with people jumping in and realizing that how bad the servers and the bartenders and folks like that, not just the business owners, are going to, be impacted by this. So everybody wants to help, and we've been trying to point people to the different resources, the different federal relief programs and the like that are out there. Some, we were set up the same way the chamber was. I mentioned we spun off of them, so we're incorporated as a 501c6 nonprofit, which is not eligible for the Paycheck Protection. Mm-hmm. Right. That was left out for whatever reason. And even in the subsequent federal bills, it hasn't been included. So, we've not been able to pursue that, but we ourselves are looking at all these options because the vast majority of our budget comes from the hotel tax, and that has fallen off a cliff. And we live month by month off of that. So county has always been very supportive. And working with, County Executive Gardner, looking at ways we can be able to do what we need to do when the light turns green, to be able to, push the marketing button and as folks feel comfortable traveling again and as it's safe, get them back, because it's not just dollars in a business owner's pocket. It's a lot of people's livelihood.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And uh, you mentioned the diversity and the variety that is a strength or a benefit, makes us a little more resilient, perhaps, in terms of our tourism industry and the dollars that are spent here. But we're also a tourism-based industry that is um, more regionally focused, I suppose. I mean, you get people who travel even from around the world for Civil War battlefields, things
Mhm.
like that. Of course, you get every kind of traveler. But as a percentage, I'm wondering if the number of people who might not be getting on airplanes, but are looking for that local or regional alternative, a day or a weekend trip, a place to drive to, might also be one of the things that helps us to bounce back in that regard.
Well, you're absolutely right. And I should mention, we appreciated your service on our board of directors back in your county commissioner days. And that same mix holds true today. We see changes, obviously things like the wineries, breweries, distilleries, the craft beverage market that was around decades ago with the wineries has really taken off. But that mix is really, I think, a strength for us. So the people that travel the furthest do generally come because of our history. If they're coming from the western half of the US, it's usually Civil War history. They may have studied it their whole life. They want to visit this region and get around. That might take a little while before folks are comfortable with flying again. After 9/11, and of course that was a different type of threat, but it was 4.5 years before air travel really got back to where it was prior to that. But we have a huge portion of this country's population, and quite frankly, the richest portion of this country's population, within a day's drive of Frederick County. And all the research we see, the traveler sentiment studies that are being done now, all indicate that folks are going to drive. They still want to do getaways.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be way more comfortable getting in the car. And we're fortunate that, the states around Maryland have always been the largest source of our visitors. And then beyond that, New York and New Jersey. But we have so many here right within, a few hours drive really, that it's the same thing that sort of happens every time gas prices spike real high right now. But every time they get up real high, I'll get calls from media asking what's the impact, how much is it going to hurt? And quite frankly, we benefit as much as we might suffer, in that the folks that decide not to drive to the Carolinas and do a vacation closer to home are here. So as I said, fortunate not to have all of our eggs in one basket. And so these different things do balance out. There are big questions. Everybody's wondering whether the whole world has gotten used to Zoom meetings now, and there won't be as much business travel. We get a lot of that here. And so, that's an unknown. The convention market, I think, is one that is likely to take the longest from the projections we've seen. And that's not been a big piece of our business. We do smaller kind of regional types of meetings that hopefully will be able to come back. So, looking at our website analytics, in a normal year, we would see events be the most visited part of our website.
Right.
We want to know what's happening when they're going to be in the area, as well as local folks in the region that are on that. That has just dropped right out of sight.
Well, the number of people from outside the county who attend things like In the Street. Well, I should say now it's finally, they changed the name to In the Street
after decades.
After so many of us were saying it the wrong way for so long, they just changed the name. But things like that, and the arts festivals and other major events, even concerts and things like that. We don't know how long it's going to be before those sorts of larger events, of course, professional sports, collegiate sports, any kind of large gatherings are going to happen, how that's going to unfold. And certainly that will have an impact. I'm sure those bring a lot of money in a one day or one weekend or 1 week sort of burst into the community. But you mentioned that your reliance in the Tourism Council on the dollars that come from the hotel motel tax, which is a tax put on visitors from outside the county who don't live here or staying here, coming for reasons related to tourism often and things like that. How significant, a lot of people who might not be highly familiar with the Tourism Council or would just appreciate generally that there is one promoting our activity, may not realize kind of how that money is spent. and what it gets used for and who it benefits from, and some of the programs you have to distribute that, throughout the community to a lot of these smaller organizations and destinations. Do you want to take a moment just to provide some perspective on how that's going to
Sure.
make a difference, and what it might take from the county or other partners to sort of minimize some of the impact of that?
Sure. We really have three main roles. Destination marketing is really the prime one. We're technically known as a destination marketing organization. And that has certainly changed as technology and communication channels have changed, but the basic, mission is still the same, which is, find out why people like your product and tell other people, and fish where the fish are biting. It's changed from where it would be, say, all print ads and people would pick up the phone and call an 800 number or fill out the little postcard at the back of a magazine, to where now the vast majority of people respond to any marketing you do, whether it's social media ads or quite frankly, print ads do still drive tons of people to websites. And so it's to push that information out. It's really to inspire them to make the trip. So we do a lot of still traditional advertising, lots of working with travel writers and other media. So again, trying to inspire stories. These days, of course, you have all your influencers, and one of the new challenges is figuring out how serious a blogger is. Is it more than his mom that follows them, before you start trying to set up a trip for them and that kind of thing. So it's working with all those different media channels and resources on the destination marketing front. In addition to that, we still go to trade shows, things like the American Bus Association, and that's an industry that's wondering if they're going to come out the other side.
I'm sure.
Sure. Just the demographics of the country and the changing habits of baby boomers as they age, has had that industry retooling, and now to have the COVID situation on top of that, we're going to have to see how the group tour market responds.
Well, and for a little while, people are just going to be, some percentage of people, but an economically significant percentage, are going to be hesitant to put themselves on an airplane, in a train, car, on a bus for an extended period of time until they feel more safe about that.
Right. So again, these days, it's a little bit easier to get an instantaneous response to what's working. And so we'll retool our messaging as we see the comfort level and as people start returning, in different segments, and target our efforts there on the destination marketing front. We do visitor services is the most conspicuous because we have a visitor center. And I think when a lot of people think of our organization, they think that's what we do. We run an information center. We're reading up on all the guidelines and such, figuring out when we'll be reopening the Frederick Visitor Center. We're a little bit of a hybrid. We have a theater here, so that might be longer coming back. The front desk now has sneeze guards all around it, so we're implementing some of those things and figuring out, we're fortunate, and it's part of the blessing of having a board of directors that's a cross section of the community. So some of the folks that run large venues, whether it be the hotel general managers, the Keys general manager, the Weinberg Center director, different folks that have been on the board over the years, have their own wisdom to share. And that was very helpful in planning this facility. And so, knock on wood, we have all touch-free fixtures in our restrooms. The HVAC system was set up from the beginning that all of the return air from the restrooms gets exhausted through an energy recovery ventilator.
Wow.
We're fortunate that a lot of that infrastructure was already set up. We may go a step further and, try to separate the doors as, entrances or exits and some of those things, and obviously signage and masks. But anyway, visitor services is, part we've been doing since the organization started in 1976. We also publish an annual visitor guide. Even in the age of the internet and smartphones, we still put out 150,000 of those every year, and people want the hard copy.
Mm-hmm.
That experience of, it's amazing how many people get on the website. The first thing they do is request visitor guide get sent.
Well, it could sit in there on their coffee table or in their car. It's handy. Yeah.
Yep. And, if you spend your whole day staring at screens, it's sort of nice to be able to sit in a comfy chair and flip through a publication and that. So that's still a piece that I think we'll be doing for the foreseeable future, a calendar of events. As I mentioned, we have the online one, but there's also a printed one. Sorry about the telephone.
No problem. The nature of
folks are still calling, so we're still getting emails and calls and, lots of questions. As we moved into this situation in March, it was really a moving target, just trying to keep event information current, all of that. And the people I really feel for right now are the ones that are the organizers of events that are planned for this summer or say early fall.
And don't know what to do.
Destination marketing, visitor services, and then destination development is the other piece of it. And that really ranges, you mentioned some of the different boards and such that I sit on. It's getting involved with different organizations, across the county that are doing different things, even regional organizations. It is the grant program that we run, a program called TRIP, Tourism Reinvestment and Promotion Product. And so some of that hotel tax money that we get there's a formula-driven percentage that goes out, and we have a competitive application process where nonprofits, from one end of the county to the other apply every year. And
no, I remember. It's in fact, I've always been very impressed by how thorough and rigorous that process really is, and how seriously the applicants take it or learn quickly to take it if the first year they didn't approach it that way. But that puts, a few $100s, a few $1,000s, or $10,000, whatever, in the, makes it available to a lot of these smaller destinations that are part of that broader sort of county picture, county package, and everything. So,
this current year we awarded $285,000 through TRIP grants. Folks can get as much as $40,000. There are a few that can fully fund it, but it's a lot of different organizations. It helps leverage their money. Our goal has always been not to replace the dollars that you could have gotten somewhere else, but to leverage them. And so all those dollars get matched. And knock on wood, we set up a reserve fund. And so, one of my goals has been to never have to claw back money after we awarded it to somebody and they made their plans, to come back and say, well, if you read the fine print, it says, pending resources available or something. So we have enough reserve funds that we're able to keep everybody that got a fiscal 2020 grant intact. And we've given them some flexibility. Obviously, if they got money to advertise an event that was supposed to happen in May and it's being postponed, we've said, you don't have to meet that June 30th deadline, giving them a little bit more flexibility how they spend it. Next year is a big question mark because hotel revenue is off 70% right now. And so this is typically the time applications were just collected a little while ago. Committee is reviewing them right now, and our board of directors will vote on them in June for the period that starts July 1. For the first time, we divided the year in half. We made people apply for just the first 6 months so that we can see what happens. So that way we're able to be a little bit conservative and fund that portion with what we already have in reserve until we see how quickly hotel revenue starts to return, because that helps fund that program. There's another one we have that funds the state designated main streets in the county. We're fortunate we have more here in Frederick County than anywhere in Maryland. And so the program where the State Department of Housing and Community Development will certify you as a designated Maryland Main Street. Downtown Frederick, Middletown, Brunswick, Fairmont, Newmarket. Mount Airy is also one, although their main street is on the Carroll County side of the line. So we have a nice concentration of them. Yeah, it's the back, wall of the buildings there. So we've always told them that as soon as you expand that into Frederick County, you're eligible for these dollars too. And so we have a formula, and again, it's to leverage the local dollars. It's not to say, okay, town, you don't have to put money into Main Street anymore. It's how do you take that and grow the program? And that's another one where it's a month-by-month calculation based on the funds that actually come in. So they're feeling it just as we are.
Well, and I mean, that is one of the things with a lot of disasters that might happen, a natural disaster, other things like that, you kind of know what the impact is and you can make certain projections. Here, there's so much we don't know looking forward as to the timing of things and people's behavior, the economy, other things like that. As we wrap up, can you share any insights that you might have about what municipal governments, county governments, and Frederick County residents and businesses can do to help in this regard, all the way down from, direct funding of certain things to staycations, maybe, as we make up some of that money with local dollars spent in our tourist activities.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we have a great community that really understood right from the beginning how much this was going to hurt the businesses that they support. An irony that in a community that is so strong with local entrepreneurs and small independent businesses that are always in normal times competing with somebody like Walmart, that this situation comes along and says, okay, everybody, you got to go to Walmart now.
Yeah.
And so, I think that as curbside pickup was available and returns, and as restaurants and shops are able to reopen, I mean, what would help our mission is to go out and support these folks. If you only would eat out in a restaurant once in a blue moon, think about, as you feel safe and comfortable and all the precautions are in place, doing that as much as you can.
But even if you have hesitance there to go sit in a restaurant, I mean, I've probably gotten takeout about 8 times. Maybe, I'm sure there are people who've done it a lot more. That's probably about once a week or something, but you can buy a book through a bookstore without going to the store and have them order or mail it. There are a lot of things you can do to support, the Curious Iguana instead of Amazon Books or other local businesses, even if you're being hesitant to sit down in a restaurant or browse through a bookstore, things like that. And that's a mindset. That's a kind of a commitment.
Absolutely.
To,
The other thing is, you think about all the events that are fundraisers, not so much ones that are necessarily a tourist draw, but the local fire company carnivals and the like, as those fall, those are major fundraisers for these organizations. And
they are.
You can do to support the people that aren't doing the event that you would always attend, to help them get through this year until times, get a little bit more back to normal. Right. Will help us all. And
not a bad time for me to put in a plug for one of my favorite gifts to give, and that's the Downtown Frederick Partnership gift cards, which allow people to, I don't know how that affects things timing wise right now, because people might not be spending it right away, but that's, they're available for sale at the tourism center, which is
and actually we are still getting folks asking about them and buying them. Typically the end of the sports season and the end of the school year are the busiest times after Christmas. We sell the most in the month of December, but they're also the great teacher gift at the end of the year. But we've actually been telling people that what would be a more immediate benefit is to buy a direct gift card from the different local businesses. Because until you use that downtown gift card,
they don't get the cash.
It's basically a MasterCard.
Right.
So it's sitting, in the bank, as opposed to the merchant. The merchant doesn't get it until you actually do it there. Whereas if you buy a Curious Iguana gift card, they're getting the money right now, or any of the restaurants or whatever. So that's a way to help them out now, and then it's a chance for you in the future. You have that to use. But yeah, things are. Once the visitor centers open again, we sell those downtown gift cards, and they have been increasingly popular every year that we've had them.
You don't sell those online, do you?
No, you cannot order them over the phone. We've talked about online, but at the moment it's in person in the visitor center. That's a plus for us. Quite frankly, tourism loses money on most of them, because when people buy them with plastic, we don't put a service charge on them unless we're mailing it to you.
But it gets people to come in, and then they're standing there at the cash register looking at all those little Maryland tidbits and the exhibits they have to go past, and the brochures on the way out the back door.
And then when they have visiting company during the holidays, they remember to bring them in here. So that's the win for us.
Well, for people who haven't been there, I mean, I encourage people, when they feel comfortable and when it's open, to visit the visitor center. It is an amazing facility, and I still remember walking around the shell of a building when the reconstruction or deconstruction was going on, and just imagine how well the vision came together and what a remarkable sort of adaptive reuse that is in the new gateway to Frederick. It's been a remarkable thing, and you're lucky enough, you're there right now, right?
And yeah, putting up the last of the sneeze guards out at the front desk, so we'll be ready when we're able to open the doors again.
Good. Well, that'll be soon, I think. So thank you very much. I will share when we post this all the any links, Tourism Council, others, but if there's any you want to pitch right now real quick as we head out, feel free to do that.
Visit president.Org is the website, and my staff has been great in keeping that current. As rules have changed regarding parks or whatever it is, they're staying on top of that, keeping that information up to date. And as folks are looking for what they feel comfortable doing, whether it's historic bridges out in the countryside or getting around to the different parks and trails, you'll find all of that there.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time. I appreciate it. And I appreciate all that you do. I mean, I think these tourism assets are not just an important and vital part of our local economy. They're an important and vital part of our community and our landscape and our culture, really. Many of them, most of them perhaps directly. And so are you. And
well, thank you.
I appreciate all that you do. So thank you very much, John.
And thanks for the opportunity.
My pleasure.